Hare Krishna. Today we're going
Hare
to talk.
Krishna.
Today we're going to talk about intimate partner violence and abuse, and we're very lucky to have with us Krishna Devidasi. She has a master's degree in counseling psychology, and she's also spent quite a bit of time working with the Canadian Council on Stopping Violence at Women's Resource Centers. One of her specializations is working with women who have suffered from intimate partner violence and abuse, as well as working with individuals of other genders who have suffered from various types of trauma. She's done postgraduate training in many various somatic-based trauma therapies. She also is very adept at working with couples and has studied emotionally focused couples therapy. She draws mainly from relational experiential models that involve emotion and body-based techniques, as well as elements of cognitive behavioral work. So we're very fortunate to have her with us today.
I feel really excited to be here today. Thank you so much for having me.
So my husband and I, we travel quite widely, and we give seminars helping devotees navigate the inevitable complexities of relationships and couples. And we often find that the symptoms of abuse are actually not well recognized. So maybe you could start by giving us a definition of abuse.
Yeah, totally. When I think of abuse, or the way that I've come to understand abuse in my work, I have a very broad definition. So essentially the essence of abuse is to gain control over another person, to gain power or control. So to give that broad definition, abuse can be defined as any act or behavior with the intention behind it to gain any sort of power or control over another person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about it in intimate partner situations,
Yeah.
could you give some examples of behaviors that would constitute abuse?
Totally. Yeah, this is something that I'm very passionate about because there are so many different types of abuse, but unfortunately the types that get the most spotlight are physical abuse and sexual abuse because they are the most easily identified. And in reality, there are so many other types that slip under the radar because they're just a little bit harder to identify, or they're not as recognized in society. So it can be very invalidating for women who are experiencing these types of abuse. Before I get into what some examples of these types of abuse are, I do want to say that I am going to be using the pronoun she, her, and hers when referring to the person who's been abused, and he, him, or his for the person who's the abuser. Just for convenience sake, I don't want to discount any men's experience out there. Men do experience abuse. But just for the purpose of this interview of staying consistent, I'm going to be using those pronouns.
Okay. Thanks for the heads up on that.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. So my understanding is that emotional abuse can be sometimes even more devastating than physical.
Yeah.
So maybe you'd like to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll start with emotional abuse because you're right. It is a really big category that does get brushed under the rug a lot. And so I'm going to list some examples, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but some common ones are putting her down, making her feel bad about herself, name calling, making her think she's crazy, mind games, humiliation tactics, making her feel guilty. So any sort of emotional tactic that's used to make her feel less than or to have control over her. Another category of,
the victim would start believing it after a while.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when I work with women who have experienced emotional abuse, it is a bit of a paradigm flip for them to start to understand that my partner is such a master manipulator, that he's so good at this, that he's been able to convince me of all these things about myself that aren't actually true. So yeah, they definitely do start to believe it. And yeah, another type can be intimidation, making someone feel afraid by using looks, actions, gestures, destroying objects, abusing pets, displaying weapons. Oftentimes, when women are emotionally abused, they get blamed for it. There's a lot of minimizing and denying behaviors that go on, or just simply making light of the abuse, not really taking it seriously, saying the abuse didn't happen, saying it was her fault. So these are all examples of emotional abuse that can be very damaging.
Erodes your
For sure.
sense of self. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it really harms the sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another common one in families is using children. So
Oh, as leverage.
as leverage, yeah, making her feel guilty about the children, using children to relay inappropriate messages between mom and dad. That's a common one. If there's been a separation already, using visitation to harass her or threatening to take the kids away or harm them. Those are big ones.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, coercion and threat is another category. So making and or carrying out threats to hurt her, either physically or emotionally, threatening to leave her, threatening to commit suicide or do illegal things. The suicide one is actually a big one. I hear about this a lot, of men saying that if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself. And
Oh,
so naturally the woman might stay because she doesn't want that to happen,
right.
but actually not really recognizing that that is a type of abuse.
Right. And probably a bluff.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of the time it is just another tactic to control her.
Mm-hmm. What
Yeah.
about economic and financial abuse? That could be a
Yeah,
really subtle form of emotional abuse.
totally. Yeah, economic and financial abuse. This usually looks like, preventing her from getting a job, making her ask for money or giving her an allowance, sometimes even taking her money. Like if she does have a job and she's earning money, he has this control that he gets to go into her bank account and take the money. Yeah, not letting her know about family income decisions, not really giving her a say in that process. Those are all pretty common examples of financial abuse.
So do people that are abused start to experience some symptoms in their bodies or that can
Mhm.
help them recognize that they're being abused? Because it's really easy to just be so used to it that you don't recognize it anymore.
Totally. Yeah, that is a really common piece, that sometimes it just becomes your normal because that is your everyday life. And so it's hard to know exactly when abuse is happening because you're just so used to it. So in that sense, well, even before going internally and looking inwards to recognize the signs and symptoms, it is helpful to look externally. So
Mm-hmm.
for example, we just went through a set of abusive behaviors and
Right.
types of abuse. There are lots of
So
resources
check the
on.
boxes.
Exactly. Yeah. Check the boxes. One that I rely on a lot is called the Power and Control Wheel. So you can Google that, and that gives a really great layout of all the different types of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, get a sense if there actually are obvious abusive behaviors based on what we know about abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of checking inwards with oneself, what happens when I check in with myself, when I'm around this person? Do I notice that I feel safe and calm? Or do I notice that I feel really activated or emotionally unsafe inside? And when I say unsafe or emotionally unsafe, I don't necessarily mean that I'm afraid for my physical safety,
Mm-hmm.
that he's going to harm me physically, but just how do I feel when I'm around him? Do I feel like I have an openness? Do I feel like I can trust him?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I feel like I have a wall up and I'm constantly protecting myself? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So it's definitely very helpful to check in with the body like that.
Sounds like it would be a good thing to notice when you're getting into a relationship, how comfortable you feel.
Yes. Yeah, and that's actually something that I work with my women a lot, after being in an abusive relationship, learning to trust their bodies, to trust their intuition, because there's so much wisdom there
Mhm.
when we just take time to listen to what's going on inside of ourselves rather than, brushing that gut feeling away. Actually, a lot of the time it tells us something really important if we're able to listen.
Any other red flags when you're getting to know someone that could put, that you know?
Um, Yeah, yeah. In terms of red flags, a big one is if you're getting a feeling that this is just too good to be true.
Ah,
And a lot of
sounds
the
too good to
time,
be true.
yeah, yeah. But a lot of the time, you might be thinking, well, even if I am getting this bit of a red flag that it's too good to be true, maybe he just really is so good that I'm not going to listen to that gut feeling.
So
And
it
a
sort of
lot of,
means that he's masking his real self because it's too good to be true. That's what you're saying.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of overt romantic gestures, like really big gestures, wanting to spend maybe a lot of time together, um, wanting to move in too quickly. A lot of the times when women end up in abusive relationships, it happens very fast
Hmm.
that, they decide to move in after only having known each other very briefly, or get married only knowing each other very briefly. And then there's a sudden shift,
Right.
and he takes a bit of a turn and things change, and she gets to see his true colors.
Hmm.
So a big word of advice that I would say is taking your time to get to know somebody and listening to your body, just like you mentioned.
Right. Another one that I've noticed is that people who tend to be blamers are always blaming everything else for why,
Yeah,
because
yep,
pretty soon you're going to be the person blamed for everything.
exactly. Yeah, people who don't take any ownership, and
Wow.
that's a really big one that
Mhm.
abusers tend to never take ownership.
So we tend to think that abusers just lose control and they can't help it. But you were
Yeah.
saying people abuse to get a sense of control. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, this is a really interesting point, because a lot of the time when women come into my office for counseling, they often say things like, well, he just loses control and he doesn't know he's being abusive, and he's just not able to make a proper decision at that point. He has no choice.
Hmm.
But then I usually have a follow-up question with something like, well, how does he behave at work?
Mm.
Or what are his relationships with his friends like?
So how
And they
come he can do it?
usually,
How come he can do it then and he can't do it?
yeah, and they usually do respond with something like, oh, well, he's great at work. His coworkers love him. His friends think he's the best guy in the world. And so there's a bit of a discrepancy there, right? Something doesn't quite add up, that he's somehow able to be this amazing guy at work and in his social life, but when it comes to being at home, there's a shift.
Hmm.
So
And
he always is making a
that
choice.
sheds a lot of light onto why in our devotional settings we might see a person one way. We might find it really hard to believe that there's this other side of them because we've never seen it.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. He might be the perfect saint coming to the temple for Mangalarti every day and doing a lot of service, and at home he's totally different.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's another reason why it's always important to believe women when they talk about their experience.
Hmm. I've also, yeah, very important to believe them. Just to go back a little bit, you were explaining how sometimes women, they just like almost fiercely defend their abusive partner.
Yeah.
So why?
hmm there are several reasons that this happens, and it's really different from person to person. But a common one is that women might feel a sense of loyalty to their partner. Perhaps he's done something really great for them, or he continues to do great things. Let's say he's a really good provider for the
Okay,
family and she
right.
really appreciates that. And so she sheds a lot of light on that. or if in the
Or he has
past,
really steady sadhana or something.
yeah, exactly. Really steady sadhana, maybe
Be
he's really
abusive because he's a
respected.
great devotee. He couldn't
Yeah,
be abusive because he's a great devotee.
exactly. Yeah, he could be totally respected in the ISKCON community, and, she just has this loyalty. Or maybe he helped her get out of a really bad situation in the past. Maybe he helped kind of rescue her from a previous abusive relationship. So she feels indebted to him for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. And so it's a bit of a difficult cycle, because she has this gratitude or this feeling that, yeah, he does have these good qualities, but at the same time, he also does these really awful things, these awful abusive things. And it's so hard to hold both. And when it comes to somebody we care about like that, the tendency often is to shed more light on the positive things,
Mm-hmm.
to focus on the honeymoon phase. In the beginning of our relationship, he was such a great guy. He was so kind and caring, respectful, and maybe he'll go back to that.
Okay.
Or even now he might do kind, caring, and respectful things. And it's important to kind of evaluate that, because he might be doing those kind, caring, and respectful things because he wants to gain that sense of control. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So how does one kind of decide when, okay, enough is enough, I can't, and should I leave or should I try a little longer? How do
Yeah.
you make those decisions?
Um, it's a really good question.
A lot of
Change
prayer,
is,
I'm sure.
yeah, a lot of prayer, definitely. And change is a scary thing. Sometimes we might feel like we're not enough in and of ourselves due to emotional abuse. Or sometimes really in our current situation, we just might not have the supports and resources to be able to move forward, especially if you're coming from a culture that doesn't really believe in abuse or that allows men to get away with that.
Mm-hmm.
There might not be resources to be able to go get counseling or to go access, victim services. You might have a family, and because of your background, they're going to shun you if you leave your
Right.
partner.
Mm-hmm.
So it really, really brings up a lot of concerns for certain people.
Mm-hmm. And
Sorry, I forgot what your initial question was.
that was why. Why is it so hard? So
Okay, yeah.
you did shed light on that. And sometimes when we're looking from the outside, we just think, well, you should know it. Why are you even in there? Like we start to put down the person that stays in the abusive
Yeah.
relationship, not realizing, all the extraneous situations that they have to take into consideration.
Exactly. Yeah. And it can be so easy to come from that place of judgment when we're not the ones in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be one of the best things you can do as somebody who's wanting to support a
Mm-hmm.
woman who's being abused, is to come from a non-judgmental place of just accepting her in where she's at and showing empathy and not necessarily trying to fix it if that's not what she's asking for right
Okay.
now.
Just say, if you ever need anything, I'm here or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. If you ever need a safe place to come, come for dinner, spend the night, or if you ever need a place to store your valuable items because you're afraid of what your abuser might do to them, you're welcome to store them at my place. Or if you ever need somebody to call the police for you, pick up the phone, say that you're ordering a pizza and I'm going to call the police for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's good to have exit strategies.
Yes. Yeah.
And it seems like they probably have to be quite well planned. Do you discuss that
Yeah.
with clients?
Yeah, definitely, because it's important to have a well-planned exit strategy, maybe even a few different options for
Mhm.
strategies.
Right.
Because when you're in that moment of being ready to leave, there's going to be so much emotion that's coming up for you that your logical brain isn't necessarily going to be online. So it can be so helpful to have that all planned out already so you don't have to think about it, and you can leave in a way that's, for one, safe, effective, and sustainable, as in you're not going to have to keep going back to get certain things and risk your physical or emotional safety by going back.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it would be helpful to share some strategies?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Some that are helpful, figuring out who you can call on for assistance if needed, and that can include the police, a counselor, a friend, a family member. And if your partner is somebody who goes through your phone, which is quite common, it's best to disguise the name and the contact info so that even if they are going through your phone, they just see that you're calling Sally, or not the non-emergency line for the police.
Right.
So that's a good one. Making sure you know which exit in your home you're going to get out of. So what door, what window, even if it's a fire escape or a window, like practice that ahead of time so you're well prepared. Even have your purse and your keys near that place. And use your judgment and intuition, if the situation is very serious. Give your partner what he wants. If that's going to preserve some of your physical and emotional safety in that moment, you have to pick your battles,
Right.
especially if you have kids that you're looking out for as well. Change as many passwords as you can, because like I said, a lot of men do hack in, a lot of abusive men do hack into those things. Create a bank account. And if you're getting ready to leave, I suggest storing important documents, like I mentioned before, at a friend's place or somebody you trust, such as passports, even family photo that matter a lot to you. Deities, even if you have them, store them there. Everything that means a lot to you. Yeah,
Okay.
These are a few. This is by no means an exhaustive list. Yeah.
But it gives people an idea of what to think of, because
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And I would really recommend, trying to tap into resources wherever you might be in the world. It's difficult for me to give you resources right now because I'm in Canada and you might be on the other side of the world. So try to reach out to somebody like a counselor who's able to help you to tap
Find
into
proper resources. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're in Canada, the Stopping the Violence program is a great place to start. And they do offer them in a lot of remote locations in Canada. So that's always a really good starting place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what if a person just feels that they can't leave? What are some things they can do to cope in the situation? Or
Yeah. Yeah, first of all, like I was saying, if a person can't leave, it's worth respecting and recognizing that, if you're that person that's considering whether to leave or not and now just doesn't feel like the right time, it doesn't mean that you're never going to feel ready to leave. There might be a time in the future that you do feel ready or that you do have enough resources. So doing little bits of planning ahead of time can be really helpful. Even if it is just creating a secret bank account and putting a little bit of money in each month, or, researching some counselors that might be able to help you through this or other resources. Also, having a safe place to go in the meantime is really helpful, whether it be a safe place in your home where you feel relaxed and comfortable, or it could be somebody else's home. It could be the temple. It could even be a safe place in your mind. I know that might sound hokey for some people, but the practice of visualization can be so powerful sometimes. Imagining that you're in Vrindavan or Mayapur or whatever a safe place might be for you, maybe at the beach, safe place in nature. That can be very comforting for the nervous system and very helpful. So these are a few things that can be helpful in terms of choosing to stay in a relationship.
so we touched on it a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
But if we're like a friend and we suspect that one of our friends is being abused, what can we do if we suspect abuse?
Yeah. The thing that you don't want to do is going to the abusive partner and trying to confront him about it, because most of the time he won't admit it. And that can create an even more dangerous situation for the woman who's still in the relationship if he finds out that she's been talking to somebody, or that people suspect this. That can create a lot of physical and emotional danger for her when she gets home that day. So definitely don't do that. But yeah, like I was saying before, making your home a safe place. And if your home isn't a safe place, letting her know that, hey, even if I'm not available to talk today, we can go take a walk in the park, and, we can just spend some time together and be in a calm place. And that can go a long way. Or even if you just want to volunteer to do some research on her behalf for resources. Like I said, if she is with an abuser who tracks her search history on her computer or her browser history, whatever it's called, then that's going to be really challenging for her to find those resources by herself. So that could be a huge help. But yeah, the biggest thing is just staying out of judgment, which is so difficult when, you enjoy it as much as most of us do. It's a Brene Brown quote. People do really enjoy being in that judgment place, even if it's not a conscious thing.
What I've experienced is sometimes women, they'll come to me and they'll start saying, well, I don't know what I'm doing wrong in the relationship. I just can't seem to make it work, and my husband seems to be displeased with me, and they're trying to fix themselves, and they're reaching out for counseling. So, we're always trained to ask the right questions to see if there's actually abuse, because it's very easy to advise a person, oh, just go for counseling if you're having relationship problems.
Totally.
But counselors don't counsel couples when there's abuse, because she's going to speak about it in the relationship. They're going to go home and she's going to get bullied or beaten up or whatever, because so, advising them to go get counseling, well, it's well-meaning, might,
it can be a very dangerous option for them to go for couples counseling. Any ethical couples counselor won't see a couple if they know that there's abuse going on. And going back to what you were saying before about signs and symptoms of knowing that we're experiencing abuse, you bring up a really great one. If there's that feeling that I'm doing nothing right, or nothing I can do is right, everything I do he just gets mad at, or he shuts me out, or he has some sort of negative reaction to, that's usually a sign that there's some sort of abuse going on. And that creates that, sensation of walking on eggshells.
Walking on thin ice. I found the devotee, the vegetarian.
Yeah, exactly. Walking on thin ice, feeling like you have to tiptoe around everything. And the reality is knowing that even if you're the best partner in the world and you do all the right things and check all the boxes, he's not going to change. That's what the research shows, that the majority of abusive men, unfortunately, don't change, and that they've come up with a set of factors that it would take for them to change. And usually when I show women that list of factors, they say, oh, there's no way he's going to do all of this. There's no way he's going to take ownership for his actions and recognize the harm that he's caused. And there's no way he's going to get help for this because he doesn't believe there's a problem.
Right. I believe that research shows that the only way that abusers do get help is when you threaten, divorce or to leave unless they take counseling, or it's mandated by victim services. And even then, the results are totally in the hands of how sincere the person is to carry out what needs to be done.
Exactly. And I would be very skeptical about abusers in those situations getting that kind of help, because if they're mandated or they're just doing it to keep their partner with them because their partner is threatening to leave, that's external motivation that they're doing it before. That's not internal motivation. It's not because they actually want to change and be better and do better in the relationship. It's because of these external outside forces. And usually when we're doing things because of outside motivation like that, the change isn't long lasting. And so it's very likely that he's just going to go back to his behavior.
Yeah, they say the recidivism is very high in emotional abuse.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's not hopeless. Like there are some therapists with that deal with emotional abuse that have quite high rates of success because I think they're able to, once they get them there, they may be coming from an external reason, but when they get there and they're in the setting with the others, they realize, oh, maybe I am out to lunch. You know?
Yeah, and it is possible. There is hope that it can happen, but it is rare. I've worked with a couple of abusive men in my private practice. One of them that was physically abusive, the other that was emotionally abusive, and they did really amazing work with me. And, you know, I felt really proud of them in the end. And, you know, I think they're doing really well now. So it can happen. It's just not very often that it happens. And another thing worth mentioning in that is, you know, kind of like what we were saying before, abusive men don't always look like what we picture them to be in our minds, these big, bad, scary guys. You know, these two guys that I worked with in my practice, they were lovely and charming and, you know, very enjoyable to sit with and work with. And we have to be careful, again, of those biases that we have.
So before we wrap it up, I'd like you to share any realizations that you'd like to share, having worked with victims of abuse.
Sure. My biggest realization or word of advice or encouragement is to just be kind and be gentle with yourself. You know, if you're somebody who's in an abusive relationship, or if you are somebody who's coming out of one or is recently come out of one, that doesn't say anything about who you are as a person or about your character. There's nothing wrong with you. You know, there's no one type of abused woman, contrary again to popular belief of what we might picture of an abused woman, somebody who's really weak and mild. That's not the case. You know, there's a lot of
irritating.
Or irritating. Yeah, there's a lot of very intelligent and capable, educated, strong women who end up in abusive relationships. And so this can happen to anybody. And so it doesn't speak to who you are at all. Please be kind to yourself and don't judge yourself for that, and recognize that you're not alone in that.
We're eternally part and parcel of Krsna, and Krsna loves us unconditionally.
Yes, exactly.
So thank you so much. And we're really happy we have you as a resource to help, you know, people when they get in these unfortunate circumstances. So thank you so much for doing what you do.
Thank you so much for having me and for allowing me to be a part of the service.
Hare Krishna.
Very well.